The rise of the Mongol juggernaut. September 1260. The morning sun spills across the Jezreel Valley, illuminating the rocky hills and the fertile plains that stretch toward the horizon. From the hills, a small cavalry force under the command of a Mamluk general named Bibars watches the approaching Mongol army. The rider's eyes are fixed on the valley below, knowing that in a matter of hours, destiny itself will test them. Yet even as he surveys the terrain, Bibars understands the scale of the challenge. He is facing an enemy unlike any the world has ever known. The Mongols have spent the past 5 decades reshaping the world. From the windswept steppes of Mongolia to the gates of Eastern Europe, from the deserts of Iraq to the forests of Russia, they have left kingdoms in ruin, cities in ashes, and populations decimated. They have conquered empires, destroyed dynasties, and brought entire civilizations to their knees. The secret to their dominance is simple yet profound: the horse. Every Mongol warrior is raised on horseback, learning to ride before he can walk. By adolescence, he can shoot a bow with deadly accuracy while galloping at full speed. He can sleep in the saddle, navigate by stars, and endure conditions that would break ordinary soldiers. Each warrior brings multiple remounts, allowing them to ride tirelessly across hundreds of miles. The Mongol horse itself is a marvel of evolution, small, stocky, and incredibly tough, able to survive with minimal food, endure extremes of heat and cold, and sustain the rider for days without rest. In desperate circumstances, a Mongol might even drink the blood of his horse to survive. This combination of human skill and equine endurance creates a force capable of appearing where none expect, striking with devastating precision and disappearing before reinforcements can arrive. They have perfected psychological warfare, using fear and reputation as much as arrows and steel. Cities that resist are utterly destroyed. Cities that submit are spared but remain under watchful eyes. And so, when the Mongol army approaches a battlefield, it carries with it not just men and horses, but a legacy of terror. By 1260, this force had already swept through the Middle East. In 1258, Baghdad fell. The city, a jewel of Islamic civilization for 5 centuries, home to scholars, libraries, and the Abbasid Caliphate, was annihilated. Hulagu Khan's forces executed the Caliph al-Mustasim and destroyed hundreds of thousands of lives in a matter of days. Knowledge, art, architecture, all erased. Damascus and other cities in Syria fell in succession, often without a fight, as the news of Baghdad's fate spread. The Mongols were unstoppable, or so the world believed. The Mamluks of Egypt. Yet in Egypt, a different story was being written. The Mamluks were not an ordinary army. The word Mamluk means owned or slave, but these men were far from powerless. Many were captured as boys from Central Asia or the Caucasus, brought to Egypt, trained in horsemanship, archery, swordsmanship, and strategy, and converted to Islam. They endured decades of brutal discipline, forming bonds with their comrades that lasted a lifetime. Over time, they became rulers themselves. By 1250, the Mamluks had overthrown their Ayyubid masters and established a sultanate in Egypt. Their society was unusual, technically slaves, yet enjoying prestige, wealth, and influence, rising to positions of generals, governors, and even sultans. Their military training mirrored the Mongols in intensity, but it emphasized discipline, heavy cavalry, and adaptability to the terrain of the Levant. Sultan Qutuz, the leader of Egypt in 1260, was a man forged in adversity. Born a prince in Central Asia, sold into slavery after his homeland fell to the Mongols, he had risen through the ranks through competence and courage. When Hulagu's envoys arrived in Cairo demanding surrender, some advisors counseled compliance. The Mongols had destroyed cities, crushed armies, and spread fear across continents. Submission seemed rational, prudent. But Qutuz refused. He ordered the envoys executed and mounted their heads on Cairo's city gates, a bold declaration of war, one that would echo across history. The road to Ain Jalut. The Mongols, led by the general Kutbuka, remained a formidable force even after Hulagu returned east with the bulk of his army due to the death of Monk Khan. Estimates place Kitbuka's forces at 10,000 to 20,000 seasoned Mongol cavalry, supplemented by auxiliaries from Georgia, Armenia, and Syria. They had conquered Baghdad, Damascus, and Sidon. Now Egypt seemed inevitable. But Qutuz saw an opportunity. With intelligence, speed, and knowledge of the land, he could strike before Hulagu returned. He summoned his army, roughly 20,000 strong, including Mamluk cavalry and allied Bedouin tribes. Surprisingly, even the Crusaders, traditional enemies of the Mamluks, allowed their passage through Acre, recognizing the Mongols as a far greater threat. For the first time, centuries of enmity gave way to temporary alliance against a common foe. Among Qutuz's generals, none was more critical than Bibars. A Turk from Central Asia, he had once been a fugitive in Syria and Palestine, wandering the hills and valleys that would soon become the battlefield. He knew the terrain intimately, the springs, hills, and rocky paths that would shape the outcome of the coming battle. Together, Qutuz and Bibars devised a plan that relied not on numbers or superior firepower, but on intelligence, patience, and terrain. Geography, logistics, and the pre-battle chessboard. As September 2nd, 1260, drew to a close, the Mamluk army moved quietly through the hills of northern Palestine. Bibars led a vanguard through narrow passes and rocky slopes, scouting the land with the eyes of a man who knew it as well as he knew his own hand. The Jezreel Valley lay ahead, a triangular plain stretching roughly 30 miles from Mount Carmel in the west to the Jordan River in the east, bounded by hills and low mountains. It was fertile ground for cavalry, a tempting invitation for any army to ride in and dominate, but its edges concealed hidden dangers, as Bibars knew. The Mamluks' understanding of the terrain was more than academic. Every hill, every rocky outcrop, every patch of forest could be used as a weapon. Mount Gilboa rose to the south, its slopes dotted with shrubs and trees. The northern hills of Lower Galilee created natural choke points. Mount Tabor to the northeast offered commanding views over the valley floor. In the valleys and along the springs, loose rocks and uneven soil made the ground treacherous for horses unfamiliar with the terrain. Bibars saw possibilities where Kitbuka saw opportunity, a trap that could turn the Mongols' greatest strengths against them. The Mongols, for all their skill, had a hidden vulnerability: the environment. Their horses were legendary, able to traverse the vast grasslands of Mongolia without pause. They were small, stocky, and naturally adapted to steppe conditions. But the Levant was not the steppe. Its soil was hard-packed, rocky, and uneven. Its grass sparse. Mongol hooves, unshod and hardened only for the softer earth of the steppes, suffered quickly. Cracks, bruises, and chips slowed the animals, weakened the cavalry, and reduced the Mongols' tactical advantage. The Mamluks, by contrast, had fought in this land for generations. Their horses wore iron shoes, protecting their hooves on rocky ground. Their cavalry could maneuver easily, charge downhill, and sustain the rigorous demands of the battlefield. This seemingly minor difference, shoes on hooves, was decisive in the coming fight. Then there was the matter of sustenance. A Mongol warrior relied on 3 to 4 horses, each requiring roughly 9 pounds of fodder per day. Kitbuka's army of perhaps 15,000 cavalry would need over 400,000 pounds of grass daily. The Levant simply could not support such numbers. The Mamluks understood this and, in some regions, had even practiced scorched earth tactics to deny the Mongols vital grazing land. The Mongols' logistical advantage, mobility without supply lines, was diminished by geography itself. Bibars' strategy depended on exploiting both these weaknesses. He positioned a small vanguard in the valley floor, perhaps a few thousand riders, to act as bait. The bulk of Qutuz's army would lie hidden in the hills surrounding Ain Jalut, ready to strike when the Mongols were drawn in. The plan mirrored the Mongols' own favorite tactics: a feigned retreat, a pursuit, and an ambush from multiple directions. But now the students were about to teach the masters a lesson in overconfidence. As night fell, the Mamluk positions were finalized. Fires were kept minimal to avoid detection. Scouts moved silently among the hills. Every soldier knew his role. Every arrow, every charge, every feigned retreat had been rehearsed. This was not mere improvisation, it was military chess played on the rocky board of northern Palestine. The Mongol advance. By dawn on September 3rd, Kitpuka's Mongols approached from the north. Light cavalry formed the front ranks, bows ready, their eyes fixed on the valley floor where Bibars waited. Behind them, heavier cavalry and auxiliaries from conquered territories, including Armenians, Georgians, and Syrians, maintained formation. Kitpuka expected a swift engagement, a decisive victory over a small Egyptian vanguard. To him, the Jezreel Valley was a corridor, a straightforward route to conquest. What Kitpuka did not see were the subtle disadvantages building against him. The rising sun shone directly in his soldiers' eyes, impairing vision. The rocky slopes flanking the valley were empty of defenders, but only for now. The Mamluks' knowledge of terrain, their shod horses, and their strategy to use gravity, trees, and rocks as a force multiplier were invisible until it was too late. Bibars rode among his vanguard, issuing commands, signaling units. The Mongols advanced confidently, unaware that every step forward brought them closer to a trap from which there would be no escape. The stage was set. The chess pieces were in position. And when the sun fully illuminated the valley, the first moves of the battle would begin, not with a charge, but with calculated skirmishes designed to inflame Kitpuka's arrogance. The secret weapon, horses, terrain, and strategy. As September 3rd dawned over the Jezreel Valley, Bibars and Kutus were preparing for a gamble that would decide the fate of the Islamic world. But this wasn't just a battle of swords and arrows, it was a battle of terrain, logistics, and foresight. The Mongols, masters of the Eurasian steppe, had built an empire on speed and mobility. Every cavalryman had multiple horses, trained to endure grueling marches over soft grassland. Their ponies could survive on sparse fodder, their riders could drink horse blood to sustain themselves, and their armies could cover 60 miles a day. In the open plains, they were nearly unstoppable. Syria, however, was not the steppe. Rocky hills, limestone outcrops, and semi-arid plains limited both the mobility and endurance of Mongol horses. Unlike Mamluk mounts, Mongol ponies were unshod, their hoofs cracking on stone. Food was scarce. The Mongols couldn't maintain their usual system of remounts. Bibars had spent years wandering northern Palestine, learning every hill, spring, and pass. He understood the land in a way the Mongols never could. So the plan was simple, brilliant, and dangerous. Lure the Mongols into the valley with a small vanguard and strike from hidden positions in the surrounding hills. Use the Mongols' own tactics against them, the feigned retreat, the draw into a trap, the overconfidence they had cultivated in every opponent for 50 years. Timing would be everything. One misstep, one premature engagement, and the Mamluks could be crushed before the ambush could be sprung. Even the rising sun was a tool. Bibars positioned his vanguard so that Kitpuka's army would face east, the glare in their eyes making it harder to spot movements from the Mamluk forces hiding in the hills. Every detail, from the angle of attack to the condition of the ground beneath the Mongols' hoofs, was calculated. This was a battle where intelligence, preparation, and environment would triumph over sheer numbers. The Battle of Ain Jalut. By morning, the Mongol army appeared at the northern edge of the Jezreel Valley, confident, disciplined, and battle-hardened. Kitpuka had fought alongside Hulagu in Baghdad and Damascus. His cavalry, a mix of Mongol veterans, Armenian auxiliaries, and Christian Georgian troops, was a fearsome sight. Bibars' vanguard engaged in classic harassment, hit-and-run skirmishes, arrows flying, retreating just before the Mongols could strike. Hours passed, frustration mounting in the Mongol ranks. Kitpuka, expecting a decisive engagement, pushed forward, sending heavier cavalry to pin down Bibars' small force. And then the trap was sprung. From the hills, Mamluk cavalry and infantry charged downhill from three sides. Iron-shod horses surged over rocky terrain, armored warriors crashing into the Mongols. Arrows rained from concealed positions. And then came the midfa, the first primitive firearms in the region. The loud, smoky blasts terrified the Mongol horses, throwing the disciplined army into chaos. Mamluk heavy cavalry pressed their advantage. Their larger mounts, armored and trained for close combat, bowled through the disorganized Mongol lines. Kitpuka's formation, once invincible, fractured under pressure. And crucially, the Syrian auxiliaries in the Mongol army defected, turning their weapons against Kitpuka. For the first time in 50 years, the Mongols were facing defeat in open battle. Kitpuka fought bravely to the end, either dying in combat or being captured and executed by Kutuz. What followed was a rout. Mongol cavalry, exhausted, lame, and trapped in the valley, fled north. Mamluk cavalry pursued relentlessly, the rocky terrain turning into a weapon against every fleeing Mongol horse. By nightfall, the Mongol rear guard, the same army that had conquered from Baghdad to Damascus, had been destroyed. Ain Jalut marked the first permanent defeat of the Mongols and a turning point for the Islamic world. Aftermath, consequences, and historical lessons. The victory at Ain Jalut sent shockwaves across the medieval world. Within days, Mamluk forces recaptured Damascus and Aleppo. The Mongols would never again seriously threaten Egypt. Their empire, vast as it was, had reached its western limit. Geography, horseshoes, and a clever ambush had halted a seemingly unstoppable force. Yet the human story of triumph and betrayal was far from over. Kutuz, the sultan who had made the courageous decision to fight rather than surrender, was assassinated less than 2 months later by Bibars, the general who had orchestrated the ambush. Bibars became sultan, ruling Egypt, defeating later Mongol incursions, and finally expelling the Crusaders from the Levant. The battle demonstrates a timeless lesson in warfare. Superior numbers and tactics can fail if terrain, logistics, and local knowledge are ignored. The Mongols lost not because they were less skilled, but because the environment, rocky hills, scarce grass, and local intelligence negated their advantages. History shows the same lesson repeatedly. Armies optimized for one terrain often falter in another, from the forests of North America to the mountains of Afghanistan. Ain Jalut also highlights contingency in history. Had the great Khan monk not died in 1259, Hulagu might have remained in Syria with his full army, crushing Egypt. Had Bibars not known the terrain intimately, or Kutuz chosen to submit, the Mamluk Sultanate and the Islamic Middle East might have been overrun. The Mongols, the greatest military force of their age, were defeated not by miracles, but by preparation, knowledge, and courage. Today, the site of Ain Jalut is quiet farmland. The spring still flows, the hills still rise, and the Jezreel Valley remains a testament to the power of terrain, strategy, and daring leadership. September 3rd, 1260, reminds us that even the mightiest empire can be humbled by the ground beneath its feet. Sometimes, history is determined not by swords alone, but by the land itself. Counterfactuals and global implications. Imagine, for a moment, that the Mongols had won at Ain Jalut. Kutuz had chosen surrender. Bibars had not known the terrain. Kitpuka's army had broken through the ambush. The history of the Middle East, and potentially the world, could have been entirely different. With Egypt under Mongol control, the Mongols would have gained access to the Mediterranean. North Africa might have fallen under their sway, giving them a launch pad into the Iberian Peninsula. Europe, already terrified by raids into Poland and Hungary, could have faced invasions from both the east and the south simultaneously. The Mediterranean trade networks, the lifeblood of medieval Europe, would have been under Mongol oversight. Venice, Genoa, and the Italian city-states, centers of finance, culture, and eventually the Renaissance, might have been stifled or destroyed. The Islamic world would have suffered catastrophic consequences. Cairo and Alexandria, the centers of learning and commerce, could have been sacked like Baghdad. Scholars, libraries, and centuries of accumulated knowledge might have vanished. The Mamluk Sultanate, which preserved Islamic civilization in the region, would not have risen. Islamic political and cultural life in North Africa and the Levant could have been irreparably disrupted. Even beyond politics and conquest, the Mongol victory could have reshaped religion, science, and culture. Without Mamluk control, the Crusader states in the Levant might have persisted longer, extending European influence in the Holy Land. The balance of power between Christian Europe and the Islamic world would have shifted dramatically. The intellectual exchanges that eventually helped fuel the Renaissance through trade and scholarship in the Mediterranean might have been delayed or lost. But history, of course, took a different path. Ain Jalut proved that empires have limits, that geography matters, and that local knowledge can topple even the most terrifying military force. It reminds us that history is fragile, contingent on decisions, timing, and chance. Monk Khan's death, Qutuz's courage, Biber's knowledge, and the hills of Palestine themselves all combined to produce a moment of destiny. The battle also offers timeless lessons in leadership and strategy. Bravery alone is not enough. Understanding your environment, exploiting the weaknesses of your opponent, and daring to take calculated risks are what turn the tide. Qutuz and Bibar's exemplify this principle, turning an underdog army into the instrument that halted the Mongol juggernaut. Meanwhile, Kitpukka's unwavering discipline, while admirable, highlights the danger of inflexibility. Overconfidence in strategy, without accounting for terrain or resource limitations, can be fatal. Even centuries later, Ain Jalut resonates. Military historians study it as one of the first examples of using environmental and logistical advantages to overcome a numerically and tactically superior foe. Political strategists recognize the role of alliances and timing in amplifying strength. And for ordinary people, it is a reminder that history is not just shaped by kings and generals, it is shaped by the land, the resources, and the knowledge that allows one side to outthink another. Finally, Ain Jalut underscores the human dimension of history. Courage, loyalty, betrayal, ambition, and revenge all play their parts. Qutuz, the sultan who risked everything, was murdered shortly after his triumph. Bibars, the ambitious general, seized power and secured Egypt's place as a regional superpower for generations. Kitpukka, the loyal general of the Mongol Empire, died defending a cause he believed unstoppable, illustrating the tragic heroism that so often accompanies history's pivotal moments. Standing in the Jezreel Valley today, the landscape looks peaceful, almost eternal. But beneath the quiet fields and the rolling hills lies the memory of a battle that changed the fate of empires. Ain Jalut is a testament to the idea that even the greatest forces are vulnerable when they leave the steppe and confront the real world, the hills, the valleys, the scarcity, and the ingenuity of those who know their land. It's a story that reminds us that sometimes the ground itself can decide the fate of civilizations.